He was a force of nature, a downhill runner with the power of a freight train and the feet of a ballerina. When he hit the field, defenders bounced off him like video game glitches. When he hit the hole, it wasn't just a run, it was a demolition. And when he got rolling, it felt like the NFL had unearthed a new superstar. But that's not how this story ends. Because what started as a promising NFL career didn't crash due to injury, or age, or scandal. It ended because he couldn't stop eating. This is the story of a player who had all the tools, the vision, the power, the pedigree. He made it to the league. He even made it look easy at first. But the moment the cameras turned off, the real battle began. Not against defenders, but against discipline. Not against a blitz package, but against a dinner plate. His name became a punchline. His diet became national news. And the memes, oh, the memes, they spread like wildfire. China food, weight clause, $385,000 to not eat too much. It was comedy for the internet, but it was tragedy for a career. Because behind every joke was a player losing his grip on the game he loved. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't untalented. But in the NFL, where margins are razor thin and every pound counts, he crossed the line. Again, and again, and again. This is about more than one player. It's about the pressure of being a professional athlete, when your body is your career. It's about mental health, body image, public ridicule. It's about how fast the NFL can forget you when you stop living up to the hype. Today, we look back at one of the most unique downfalls in modern NFL history. Not because of scandal, not because of injury, but because of food. This is the story of the NFL star who couldn't stay away from the table, and how that one weakness destroyed everything. How a star was born. Before the headlines, before the memes, before the weight jokes and the downfall, there was dominance. This is where it started. Born in the football-rich state of Louisiana, Eddie Lacy didn't just play football, he bulldozed through it. In high school, he was a 200-pound tank with a sprinter's burst, terrorizing defenses. With ease, recruiters watched in awe as he ran for nearly 2,000 yards in his junior season, often dragging defenders behind him like a sled. He wasn't just fast for his size, he was scary fast. He had the kind of raw talent that made you forget about mechanics or polish. The kid was a natural. When Alabama came calling, it was no surprise. Nick Saban doesn't just hand out offers to anyone. And at Alabama, a program that churns out NFL talent like a machine, Lacy was just the next man up. Waiting in line behind guys like Mark Ingram and Trent Richardson, Eddie bided his time. And when his number was finally called, he exploded. He wasn't just a contributor, he was a finisher. In the 2012 BCS National Championship, Lacy made sure everyone knew who the next Alabama star was. He dominated Notre Dame with a jaw-dropping 140-yard performance and a touchdown that left linebackers spinning in place. That famous spin move? It didn't just go viral, it became iconic. The NFL had taken notice. Despite not being a first-round pick, likely due to some early whispers about conditioning, he was drafted by the Green Bay Packers in the second round of the 2013 NFL Draft. At first, it seemed like a perfect match. The Packers didn't need a savior. They needed a spark in the backfield. They already had Aaron Rodgers, an elite passing game, and a playoff-ready roster. What they lacked was a punishing, reliable runner to balance the offense. Enter Eddie Lacy. And in year one, he delivered big time. Lacy rushed for over 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns in his rookie season, adding 35 catches. Through the air, he won NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. He wasn't just another rookie. He was a revelation. Packers fans thought they'd finally found their long-term answer at running back. The power, the elusiveness, the vision. He had it all. The highlights piled up. Stiff arms that sent safeties flying. Spin moves that made defenders miss in a phone booth. Drive after drive where he carried the Packers on his back. Sometimes, literally. He had a low center of gravity and a rare ability to absorb contact without losing momentum. Analysts praised his balance and burst. Defenses feared him in the open field. By 2014, Eddie Lacy had back-to-back 1,100-yard seasons. And more importantly, he looked like the future. In Green Bay, that meant something. The last time they'd had a truly elite running back was Ahman Green a decade earlier. Lacy was supposed to be the missing piece, the hammer too, Rodgers' scalpel, the one who would grind clock, keep defenses honest, and take pressure off. The franchise quarterback. For a while, he was exactly that. But somewhere between 2014 and 2015, things started to shift. Slowly, quietly. Conditioning whispers turned into louder concerns. Weight became a topic in interviews. Coaches tiptoed around the issue, but it was clear something was slipping. Still, it's important to remember, Eddie Lacy didn't flame out immediately. He rose. He flourished. He earned his place. He wasn't just a viral meme, he was once the most dangerous runner in the NFC North. And for a brief window, he was one of the best backs in the NFL. The tragedy of this story isn't that he never made it, it's that he did and couldn't hold on. When talent isn't enough. Eddie Lacy didn't just arrive in the NFL. He burst through the door. 2 straight 1,000-yard seasons, a Pro Bowl appearance, a fan-favorite status in Green Bay. Everything was trending up. The cracks, they were already forming. Behind the scenes, the Packers coaching staff had begun to raise quiet concerns. Not about talent, not about effort, but about weight. Even in college, there had been whispers. Alabama coaches reportedly monitored his conditioning closely. At one point, he was said to be pushing 240 pounds. Heavy for a running back who was listed at 220. But the production masked the problem. He ran well. He performed in big games. And most importantly, he won. But the NFL isn't college. And in Green Bay, those extra pounds started to cost him. By the time training camp rolled around for the 2015 season, Lacy showed up noticeably. Heavier. He didn't look like the same back who had electrified Lambeau Field just a year earlier. The burst was there in flashes, but it wasn't consistent. He looked slower, hitting the hole. Defenders wrapped him up easier. The spin moves were still there, but they were slower. Hesitant. Heavy. The media began to notice. Reporters asked head coach Mike McCarthy if Lacy's weight was an issue. McCarthy, known for keeping things in-house, gave a telling response. Eddie's got a lot of work to do. He's got to get back to playing at the level we all know he's capable of. He's got to be better. That wasn't coach speak. That was a warning shot. Privately, the Packers' strength and conditioning staff tried to help. Weight goals were implemented. Diet suggestions were made. But the progress was inconsistent. Some days, he looked locked in. Other days, sluggish. It wasn't a lack of effort. It was a struggle with routine, nutrition, and the discipline that the NFL demands on and off the field. And this is where the gap between talent and sustainability becomes clear. In college, your youth and explosiveness can cover up bad habits. In the NFL, they get exposed. Running back is the most physically demanding position in football. It's short bursts, violent, collisions, and constant pounding. Every extra pound is a liability. Every lost step is the difference between a gain and a tackle for loss. By mid-season in 2015, it was obvious. Eddie Lacy was in decline. Not because he'd aged out, not because of injuries, because he couldn't stay in peak shape. The numbers reflected it. He finished that season with just 758 rushing yards, down over 400 yards from the year before. He scored only 3 touchdowns, and, perhaps most telling, the Packers started leaning on backup. Running backs like James Starks in crucial situations. Fans were confused. Analysts were baffled. But the truth was simple. Eddie Lacy wasn't the same player anymore. And this is where the narrative started to shift. He was no longer the quiet, bruising weapon Green Bay had built its offense around. He was becoming a question mark, a liability, a what happened to that guy type of player. And for the first time, the whispers about weight weren't just private. They were public. They were national. And they were about to define everything that came next. When jokes become reality. In today's NFL, it's not enough to play well. You have to look the part. You have to sound sharp in interviews, avoid scandal, and, perhaps more than ever, you have to dodge the viral moment that reduces your entire career to one punchline. Unfortunately for Eddie Lacy, that moment came, and it never left. In 2015, as his on-field production declined and his weight became a louder topic, the public's tone shifted. Fans weren't just analyzing his game, they were mocking his size. Sports media joked about his chunky build, but social media took it even further. Then came the quote that ignited a wildfire. In an interview, Lacy casually mentioned he enjoyed eating Chinese food, like most people do. But the way it was clipped, shared, and turned into a meme changed everything. China food, he said. 2 words. That was all it took. It became the internet's go-to explanation for his decline. Twitter was relentless. Reddit threads exploded. Photoshop edits started circulating with Lacy's face on food cartons, fortune cookies, buffets. He was no longer Eddie Lacy, the Pro Bowl running back. He was Eddie Lacy, the meme. The NFL has seen its fair share of odd viral moments, but this wasn't harmless. It was dehumanizing. Every time Lacy suited up, someone was tweeting about his belly. Every time he took the field, you could almost feel the internet holding its breath, just waiting for a reason to pile on again. What's worse, it wasn't just fans anymore. In 2017, when Lacy signed with the Seattle Seahawks, the team included a controversial clause. In his contract, he'd receive $55,000 for each monthly weigh-in, where he hit a specific target. In total, he could earn up to $385,000 just for not being overweight. And again, this wasn't handled privately. It was public. Every month, fans waited like it was a reality TV show. Will Eddie make weight? Will he cash in another 50 grand? It turned his conditioning into a spectacle. Not a fitness challenge, but a circus act. Imagine trying to perform in the most violent, demanding sport on earth, while millions of people are openly laughing at your body. Imagine needing to stay mentally locked in while ESPN, Bleacher Report, and every sports meme page are joking about your stomach. This wasn't accountability, it was humiliation. The narrative had shifted permanently. Lacy could have a solid run in a game, but the broadcast would still cut to a photo of him from camp looking bloated. He could give a serious post-game interview, but all anyone wanted to talk about was what he ate for dinner. And in the process, context got erased. No one talked about the psychological toll. No one considered that weight struggles often stem from deeper battles. Stress, injuries, lifestyle transitions, even depression. All they saw was a big man and a buffet joke. It's easy to laugh at memes, but what if your worst habit, your deepest struggle, was broadcast on national TV and turned into a meme by millions of strangers? Lacy never lashed out publicly. He never blamed fans. But the spark was gone. The joy. The confidence. Because the internet had done what no linebacker could do. It brought Eddie Lacy down. The career derailment. At this point, the writing was on the wall. Eddie Lacy wasn't just trending downward, he was slipping through the cracks of the NFL. Not because of a single bad play, but because the combination of physical decline, media, ridicule, and behind-the-scenes concern had created a storm no athlete could easily outrun. The 2015 season was the first real warning sign, but 2016 was when everything started to collapse. He reported to training camp again, overweight. Coaches tried to stay optimistic. He had slimmed down slightly compared to the year before, but that wasn't the bar anymore. He wasn't compared to who he could be, he was compared to who he used to be. And for a brief moment, it looked like he was back. The first few games of the 2016 season showed flashes of the old Lacy. Powerful runs, elusiveness in space, the spark of hope. But then, Week 6 against the Dallas Cowboys. A routine play, a hard cut, and just like that, an ankle injury. Diagnosis: ankle ligament damage. He was placed on injured reserve, season over. He played just 5 games that year. It would be the last time he'd wear a Packers uniform. And that brings us to the crossroads. The Packers, despite their investment and hopes, chose not to re-sign Lacy in free agency. It wasn't a dramatic exit. There was no official press conference. They simply moved on. And in 2017, the Seattle Seahawks took a chance. They gave Lacy a one-year deal worth up to $5.5 million. But here's the part everyone remembers. Over $385,000 of that contract was tied to weight. Incentives. Let that sink in. Not touchdowns, not rushing yards, not snaps played, but weigh-ins. If Lacy could hit his monthly weight target, he'd earn $55,000 per check-in. It wasn't a contract, it was a test, and it put his most personal struggle front and center. In Seattle, the expectations were cautious optimism. The Seahawks needed a bruising, Marshawn Lynch-style runner again, and on paper, Lacy could fit the bill. But the version of Eddie Lacy that arrived in Seattle wasn't the same one from Alabama or Green Bay. He looked sluggish in preseason. He missed holes. He lacked burst. There were games where he received just 3 or 4 carries. Other times, he was inactive entirely. He finished the year with just 179 rushing yards on 69 carries. No touchdowns, no breakout games, no redemption arc. And when the season ended, so did his NFL career. At just 27 years old, Eddie Lacy was out of the league. No retirement press tour, no second act, no comeback story, just silence. One of the most promising running backs of the mid-2000s was gone before he ever turned 30. And this wasn't a case of injuries ruining a career. It wasn't a broken leg, a torn ACL, or a concussion. This was about lifestyle, habits, choices, mental health, stress, pressure, public humiliation, and maybe above all, loneliness in a profession that demands perfection from imperfect people. For fans, it looked like a fall from grace. But for Lacy, it must have felt like a slow fade into the shadows. One weigh-in, one headline, one dropped carry at a time. The mental battle. By the time Eddie Lacy disappeared from the NFL spotlight, the public had already made up its mind. He was lazy. He loved food more than football. He didn't care enough to stay in shape. That was the verdict passed by fans, media personalities, and social media commentators alike. But none of those hot takes asked the deeper question. What was going on in Eddie Lacy's mind? Because the truth, the uncomfortable truth, is that this wasn't just a story about food. It was a story about pressure, insecurity, and mental health in a league that demands perfection and gives very little grace. In a rare and emotional 2019 interview with Bleacher Report, Lacy finally opened up. And for the first time, we heard the story from the man himself, not the meme. He admitted that the constant jokes, the endless ridicule about his weight, and the pressure to meet unrealistic expectations started to take a toll on his mental health. It's like, if you're not 230, people think you're fat, he said. And it's like, man, I'm human. I have feelings too. He talked about how he would wake up dreading weigh-in days, terrified of the backlash. He missed a number. He talked about checking his phone and seeing thousands of strangers calling him fat, lazy, a waste. He talked about the isolation, the depression, the anxiety, and how every time he got close to turning it around, he'd slip up, and the whole world would watch. This wasn't just about eating habits. It was about coping mechanisms. Food, for Eddie Lacy, became a comfort during the chaos, something he could control, in a life that was spiraling out of control. Think about it. The average person struggles with diet, motivation, and self-discipline in private. But Eddie Lacy, he had to live that struggle publicly, in front of millions. He had to be perfect at the most demanding job in the world, while being mocked for trying to deal with something deeply personal. In the same interview, he said he tried to ignore the noise, tried to laugh off the memes, tried to just focus on football. The truth is, he never really had the space to heal, to reset, to breathe, because in the NFL, there's no pause button. You either perform or you're replaced. You either meet the number on the scale or you get cut. You either laugh with the world or the world laughs at you. And the longer it went on, the more Lacy withdrew. Coaches meant well, but they couldn't solve what was happening internally. Trainers set goals, but couldn't offer therapy. Teams built incentives, but didn't build support systems. And maybe that's the bigger issue here. How many other athletes are going through the same thing? Struggling with anxiety, depression, self-worth, masked behind muscles, contracts, and game day smiles? Lacey just happened to be one of the first to say it out loud. I could sit there and read 600 comments, and it would just be all negative, he said. People telling me I eat too much, that I'm a waste of talent, that I'm disgusting. And it's like, bro, I'm a person. This is what the memes never showed. This is the part of the story no one clipped for social media. The truth that Eddie Lacy wasn't weak. He was overwhelmed. And the NFL didn't give him a runway to land. They gave him a cliff. Life after the league. When the final whistle blew on Eddie Lacy's NFL career, it didn't feel like a send-off. There were no farewell press conferences, no official retirement posts, no league tributes. He didn't get the kind of closure a player of his talent should have received. He just disappeared. And maybe that was the point. For a man who had spent years being mocked in front of millions, silence probably felt like the only safe space left. After his one and only season with the Seahawks in 2017, Eddie Lacy quietly walked away from football. No team signed him, no practice squad offers, no second chances. He was just 27 years old. In the years that followed, Lacy kept a low profile. No TV appearances, no coaching gigs. While many former players transitioned to broadcasting or training roles, Lacy avoided the spotlight entirely. Occasionally, fans would stumble across a new photo of him on Instagram or Twitter. Some showed him smiling at family gatherings, others out with friends, or working out at a local gym. And like clockwork, the comment sections would fill with speculation. Is he making a comeback? Still looks heavy. Hope he's doing okay. But for the first time in years, Lacy didn't owe anyone an answer. In 2019, when he briefly opened up to Bleacher Report, he offered something rare: vulnerability. He explained how deeply the criticism affected him and how difficult it was to move on. I still get nervous about going places, man, he admitted. I walk into a restaurant and think everyone's judging me, watching what I eat. That's the emotional scar most people didn't see. Even off the field, especially off the field, he was still carrying the weight of the world's judgment. Not just the physical pounds everyone focused on, but the psychological burden that came with them. And that's where the Eddie Lacy story starts to become something else. Not just a cautionary tale about football, but a window into what happens after the game. Life after the NFL is hard, even for stars who go out on their own terms. But for someone who left the league amidst ridicule and mental fatigue, it's even harder. The structure, the routines, the team meals, the training staff, it's all gone. And in its place, silence, isolation, and for many players, a loss of identity. Eddie Lacy spent his entire young life as the football guy. From high school dominance to national championships at Alabama, to Pro Bowls in the NFL, football was the constant. And then, suddenly, it wasn't. We don't often talk about what that kind of identity crisis does to a person. When the jerseys are folded up, when the stadium lights turn off, and the fans move on to the next breakout rookie, who are you now? Lacy's case shows us the cost of public failure. Even now, when his name trends, it's rarely in a positive context. He's remembered not for the highlights, but for the weigh-ins. Not for his bruising runs, but for the jokes that followed. But maybe, in stepping away completely, Eddie Lacy found something the NFL couldn't give. Him. Peace. In recent years, he shared bits and pieces of his life, smiling in photos, cheering on Alabama, enjoying time with family. And there's something powerful in that. Because for the first time in a long time, no one's counting his calories, no one's posting his weight online. He's just living. Maybe there's no big redemption arc, no documentary, no comeback. But maybe that's okay. Because sometimes survival is the story. Bigger than one player, what happened to Eddie Lacy wasn't just about Eddie Lacy. Because behind his story, behind the weigh-ins, the memes, and the downfall, there's a much bigger conversation the NFL still isn't having. Its complicated and often unhealthy relationship with weight. Let's be clear, weight matters in football. It affects speed, durability, explosiveness, and performance. Every position has a range, a target zone. A lineman who's too light gets bullied in the trenches. A running back who's too heavy loses. Their burst. Coaches, scouts, and front office executives measure bodies like machines. And for years, this has been seen as just part of the game. But the obsession with weight isn't just scientific, it's cultural. In the NFL, body type can shape your entire career before you even take a snap. In Eddie Lacy's case, his weight became a narrative. It wasn't just a stat, it was a headline. His body was talked about more than his production. Every pound was treated like a character flaw. Every missed weigh-in like a moral failure. But here's the thing, Lacy wasn't the only one. Kelvin Benjamin, another gifted athlete with first-round talent, found himself in a similar spot. After a promising rookie season as a wide receiver for the Panthers, Benjamin struggled with injuries and weight gain. He was criticized relentlessly for showing up to camp too big, despite putting up decent numbers. Soon, like Lacy, he was out of the league. And his size, not his stat line, was what people remembered. Jamarcus Russell, once the #1 quarterback, first overall pick, faced constant ridicule for his weight. While his story involved other factors, like leadership and preparation, his body became the face of his failure. So we have to ask, where does accountability end and exploitation begin? NFL teams hand out contracts worth millions, but they also demand inhuman levels of discipline, often without offering holistic support. They'll build in weight clauses and incentives, like the infamous $385,000 tied to Eddie Lacy's weigh-ins in Seattle. But do they provide full-time nutritionists, mental health support, real-time education on body, composition, metabolism, and stress eating? In many cases, no. Instead, the league relies on shame and punishment. You miss a number, you lose money, you come in heavy, you lose playing time, or worse, your job. But the issue is more nuanced than that. Some players are naturally bigger. Some fluctuate due to injury. Others eat to cope with stress, depression, or anxiety, especially when the pressure to perform is constant, and criticism is 24/7. And unlike most people, they're doing it all under a microscope. Every pound becomes a headline. Every photo gets dissected. Every poor performance gets linked to their size, even when it's unrelated. The NFL's weight culture is rooted in performance, but often ignores the human cost. Even worse, it's inconsistent. Defensive linemen who push 350 pounds are praised for their size. But a running back at 245? Out of shape. A tight end with a big frame is a matchup nightmare. A wide receiver with a thicker build? Lazy. It's not just about size. It's about position, expectations, and optics. And it reinforces one dangerous message. Your body is only acceptable if it fits our blueprint. The damage that does, mentally, emotionally, and physically, can be long-lasting. Players have spoken out about eating disorders, body dysmorphia, and long-term health. Problems caused by fluctuating weight during their careers. But the league hasn't changed much. Sure, teams are adding more health staff. Some offer counseling and dietary programs. But until the culture changes, from punishment to support, stories like Eddie Lacy's will keep happening. His story isn't just a fall from grace. It's a mirror, held up to the entire league. Because if the NFL wants to truly protect its players, it has to start treating them like people, not numbers on a scale. Final reflection. Eddie Lacy's story isn't just about a football career that ended too soon. It's about the cost of being human in a league that rewards machines. We remember the highlights, the bruising runs, the spin moves, the Rookie of the Year campaign. We remember the way he carried defenders like backpacks, the way he energized an entire fan base. And yet, what most people will bring up when you say his name today? China food, weight problems, wasted potential. That's the tragedy of it. A man who reached the NFL, something less than 1% of players ever do, became a meme. Not for a scandal, not for breaking the rules, but for struggling with something millions of people silently battle every day: self-discipline, mental health, and body image. The internet is quick to laugh, quick to point, quick to judge. but it rarely stops to ask why. Why did a player with that much talent lose control of his body? Why didn't the league step in with deeper support instead of surface-level incentives? Why did so many fans care more about his weight than his well-being? The answers are uncomfortable because they reveal a hard truth about sports culture. We love our athletes until they stop being superheroes. We love the rise. We cheer the dominance. But when real life catches up, when they show weakness, pain, vulnerability, we turn away. Or worse, we turn them into jokes. Eddie Lacy didn't commit a crime. He didn't break the rules. He just got tired. Tired of the pressure. Tired of pretending. Tired of trying to live up to a version of himself that became impossible to maintain under constant scrutiny. And maybe, when the league let him fade into the background, it was doing what it always does, moving on to the next young, marketable star. But that doesn't mean we should forget. Because his story is a cautionary tale, yes, but also a mirror. It forces us to ask, how many other players are silently drowning beneath the surface? How many stars are privately breaking down while fans only see touchdowns and box scores? The NFL is a machine. It runs on performance. But behind every helmet is a human being. And if we can't make space for their struggles, if we can't see beyond the weight, the stats, and the contracts, then we're part of the problem too. So here's what we leave you with. Eddie Lacy was a star, a champion, a record setter. He gave fans everything he had, until there was nothing left. He didn't fail football. Football failed him. And maybe, just maybe, if we had listened sooner, if we had supported instead of ridiculed, his story would have ended differently. But even if it didn't, that doesn't mean it's worthless. Because sometimes the stories that don't end in glory are the ones we need to hear the most.